Welcome to Elpa 6454. I'm Dr. Bethany, Flora, and thrilled to be here co-teaching with Dr. Brian Noland for the inaugural cohort in Community College Leadership in Elpa. What a gift for you to be sitting where you are, because this semester you will be taught by Dr. Rich Rhoda and Dr. Brian Noland, two of who I consider the most notable policy experts in Tennessee higher education, if not nationally. So I'm a learner with you this semester. I consider myself really to be on the other side of the camera more than I should be on this side of the camera. But thank you for indulging me and allowing me the opportunity to join this class with you. A little bit about my background. I have come to the place where I am through kind of a weaving road. I was a business major, undergraduate, and master's degree in business, and my first job outside of college was working in manufacturing. It was a Fortune 500 manufacturing company, and my job was to take customer orders and order raw inventory, order raw materials, and then to schedule production on 17 different manufacturing lines. That was Ball Corporation. Very fast-paced environment. I also worked a day ahead constantly, which has come to serve me well in my project management roles, because in manufacturing, you're always working the day ahead. You're always anticipating what could happen. But when I finished my master's degree at Tusculum, I was invited to come back and teach as an adjunct. Dr. Melanie Narkowitz invited me, and that really began my love for the thought of changing future leaders instead of being one, in a way. So I was really attracted to becoming a professor at that time, and kept finding myself, though, in these administrative roles in higher education. So my first administrative role in higher education was at Northeast State Community College. I worked on a Workforce Investment Act grant there, anchored in the high school of Sullivan East High School. And an interesting tidbit about that experience, that was the year that Sullivan East had a mold problem, unfortunately. But the fortunate thing for the kids was that they moved all of the classes in the high school to Bristol Motor Speedway. So we finished out the last semester of many kids' senior years, which, what a way to remember your senior year, having class at Bristol Motor Speedway. So from that Northeast State Workforce Investment Act grant position, I transitioned then to the Southwest Virginia Higher Education Center, working for Radford University as their site director. And I do have to tell you, this has probably been one of my most rewarding experiences in higher education. It was a consortia environment. And so there were about 12 universities there under one roof, partnering to deliver academic programs to an underserved region of the area in Southwest Virginia. What was most rewarding about it was that my office was, for Radford University, was in between the Virginia Tech offices and the Old Dominion offices. And so what a rich opportunity to cross-pollinate ideas with regard to institutional policies and practices around recruitment, retention, program development. This is where I also became seasoned, speaking on my feet to a group of people about academic programs. So I would go to different consortia and Chamber of Commerce events and have to talk about what it is that we deliver in Abingdon, not just the programs that I deliver, but what all of the institutions deliver. And later on in my dissertation, I conducted it on higher education centers. I really do believe that these centers, as consortia environments, can become somewhat of a test case for higher education and interventions across the landscape as a whole, because you have publics and privates both competing and then collaborating with and against each other inside one organizational unit. So it's quite the experience. And as you get to know me and hear me talk, I tend to talk a lot about consortium environments because I think they're a remarkable way to deliver higher education. So working for RU there in Abingdon, I became a mentee, I would call it, of sorts, to my graduate dean. I reported to her. She was on the main campus at Radford University. And I was blessed when the opportunity presented itself to go to RU to become the Director of Graduate Recruitment and Retention. My dean, Dr. Carol Seifert, saw potential in me, and she said, Bethany, come up here, get close to Virginia Tech, pursue your doctorate. I'll support you while you work full-time for me. And, we all probably have stories like that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We would not be here where we are without people who believe in us. I hope you have someone like that at your institutions as you're pursuing the certificate program. So I worked recruiting. I was traveling quite a bit, but I would recruit during the day, go to so many undergraduate institutions. I have my favorites that we'll talk about in the class, but recruiting and talking to undergraduates and oftentimes their faculty or their family members about their graduate education options. I entered my doctoral program at Virginia Tech at that time, so I worked full-time and completed my PhD full-time. And while at Virginia Tech that first year working on my PhD, I had a professor, Dr. Joan Hurt, who was very good friends with an associate provost at Virginia Tech. And it just one of those things worked out to where I was able to transition from RU to Virginia Tech and went on board at Virginia Tech in March of 2007. At that time, I was hired as a special projects coordinator. The university was getting ready for reaffirmation for accreditation, and maybe you all understand this, but the periodic review of academic administrators was one piece that the institution was very much concerned with. They wanted to make sure that we were in compliance as we got ready for that SACS review. So in March of 2007, that's why I was hired. We also knew and were anticipating some turnover in the vice presidencies and in the deanships, and they wanted to hire me to manage those searches. My provost at the time was not a strong believer in the use of search firms. He much preferred using in-house folks to staff searches, and so I was hired to do those two things, the searches for vice presidents and deans, and then the periodic review of vice presidents and deans. 3 weeks later, as many of you are aware, the shootings happened on campus, and I found myself kind of leaving that role and taking over the provost crisis communication role. As you would understand, the senior leaders were pulled out immediately, working with the families, working with the media, truly being an external source in many regards. And so those of us who were left in the office became responsible for a lot of the internal operations of the institution during that season. I was promoted to an assistant provost and then took on more duties related to the recovery and response efforts. President Steger, Dr. Charles Steger, the president of Virginia Tech at the time, appointed me to staff the internal review of what happened when the shootings occurred. And so we conducted a very extensive interface interviews with all of the offices who had interacted with the shooter at the time. I staffed that. I also had the very distinct privilege of staffing the Norris Hall Task Force. My office in Burris Hall actually looked out at Norris Hall, and so I was selected to staff the Norris Hall Task Force, which determined what we would do with the space where the shootings occurred. Now, that seems pretty tense to have a baptism by fire, but I have to tell you that my experience at Virginia Tech during that time gave me a rich appreciation for the development of personal relationships with your colleagues as well as professional relationships, because the seasoned relationships of the senior administrators, what they had is what they pulled upon when they responded to the crisis. Lots of policy changes came out of that, and we'll talk about that in the class. I feel like the one little thing that maybe I could contribute to this class is the local institutional level view of policies, and I'll talk more about that as we go along the way. So at Virginia Tech, that was my job. I also worked in some of the fun things that I did was to work with faculty development and advancement. I organized the new faculty orientation program. We did board support, so the academic affairs subcommittee of the Board of Visitors. Our role was to prepare presentations, and then also the education and training of the internal campus community before things went to the board. So that was a very exciting time. Some of my favorite memories, I think, as an academic administrator were working with students, doctoral students like yourself or graduate students like yourself who would come into our office, and we would give research projects to, and it's very rewarding to see where they are today. So that's a whole lot about me, probably more than you really wanted to know, but that's what I bring academic-wise in my administrative portfolio, both in my educational portfolio as well. And then why I'm here today is that I'm an assistant professor of educational leadership at ETSU. So I've transitioned out of academic administration. Now I'm back into the classroom teaching and working with you and doing what I love. So I really do look forward mostly to our weekend sessions so that I can interact with you a little more personally. It's weird being on this side of the screen. I know that you all are going to be shooting a recording, an introduction video of your recording, so you'll understand and maybe sympathize with us here behind the camera. But I do look forward to meeting you, and I look forward to working with you, and we'll see you online soon. Take care.